I stepped through the front door, boots still caked with dust from a 6-month stint overseas, expecting the usual silence, maybe the hum of the fridge Claire always left running. Instead, a sharp whiff of something hit me. Cologne, cheap and musky like a gas station knockoff. My chest tightened. I'd spent years in recon, sniffing out trouble, literal and otherwise, so my brain kicked into gear before my heart could catch up. Claire wasn't due home for an hour, and I hadn't showered in 2 days. That scent wasn't mine. I dropped my duffel by the couch, eyes scanning the room. Everything looked normal. The faded blue curtains, the coffee table with her dog-eared romance novels. But then I saw it, a jacket slung over the armchair. Not mine, not hers. Too big, too leather, too wrong. My pulse thumped louder. I told myself it could be a friend's, maybe her brother's. He'd crashed here before. Therefore, I took a breath, trying to shake the paranoia my service had drilled into me. But the kitchen told a different story. 2 mugs sat in the sink. One hers, lipstick smudged on the rim, the other plain white, half full of cold coffee. Claire hated coffee. Always had. I stood there, staring, the pieces clicking like a lens focusing. Someone had been here. Recently. My hand brushed the counter, and I noticed a faint scratch. A fresh one, like something heavy had scraped it. A bag? A belt buckle? My mind raced, but I kept it cool. No jumping to conclusions. I grabbed my old camera from the shelf. Not for pics, just habit. Something to hold while I thought. Claire would walk in soon, all smiles, and I'd ask. Simple. But then I heard it. A creak, soft but deliberate from the bedroom. My grip tightened. The hallway stretched out like a tunnel, shadows playing tricks. I wasn't alone. Therefore, I moved, silent as I'd been trained, toward the sound. Whatever, whoever, was in there, they didn't know I was coming. Yet, I crept down the hallway, floorboards groaning under my weight despite my best efforts. The bedroom door was cracked open, just enough to see the edge of our bed. Unmade, sheets tangled like a storm had hit. Claire was a neat freak. She'd iron pillowcases if I let her. But that cologne stench grew stronger, clinging to the air like damp rot. I nudged the door wider with my foot, camera still in hand, its strap brushing my wrist. The room was empty, or so it seemed. I scanned the usual spots, under the bed, behind the curtains. Nothing. But then my eyes landed on the closet. The sliding door was off its track, just a hair like someone had yanked it shut in a hurry. My throat went dry. I'd seen guys hide in worse spots overseas, crawling into ditches, praying I'd miss them. Therefore, I stepped closer, ears straining. Silence. Too much silence. I set the camera down on the dresser, slow and deliberate, then crouched by the bed. A sock peeked out from under it. Not mine, not hers. Black, cheap, the kind you buy in bulk. My jaw clenched. I could have called out, demanded answers, but that's not how I work. I observe. I wait. I learned that snapping shots in the field, patience gets you the truth. So I stood, grabbed a heavy flashlight from my nightstand. Not for light, just leverage, and faced the closet. But before I could move, the front door rattled. Claire's voice cut through, bright and brittle. Nathan? You home already? My heart thudded. She wasn't supposed to be back yet. Therefore, I froze, calculating. If someone was in that closet, they'd heard her too. I slid the flashlight behind my back, casual-like, and called out, "Yeah, just got in. Missed you." A lie, but it bought time. Her footsteps clicked closer, and I turned, forcing a smile. She looked flawless, hair pinned up, lipstick fresh. Too fresh. But her eyes darted past me, toward the bedroom, and that's when I knew. She wasn't just surprised I was home. She was terrified of what I might have found. Therefore, I played dumb, waiting for her next move. Claire rushed over, arms wrapping around me like a vice, her perfume drowning out that lingering cologne. "You're early. I didn't even get to tidy up," she said, voice pitched too high. I hugged her back, feeling her pulse race against my chest. She was good, always had been at smoothing things over. But I'd spent years reading people under pressure, and her act wasn't holding up. Her eyes kept flicking to that closet, a twitch she couldn't hide. I pulled back, grinning like nothing was wrong. "Place looks fine. You've been busy." She nodded, launching into a story about work, some deadline late nights. Context clicked. She'd been stressed for months, always on her phone, dodging details. But then she slipped up. I had Mike over yesterday, fixing the sink. Mike, her brother. The jacket guy, maybe? My gut said no. Mike smoked menthols and wore flannel, not leather. I nodded, playing along. Sink's been leaking again? She hesitated, half a second too long, then smiled. Yeah, just a drip, but I'd checked the sink earlier. Bone dry. Therefore, my suspicion hardened into something sharp. She was lying, and not even well. I glanced at the closet again, its silence screaming louder than her chatter. Missed you, she said, tugging me toward the kitchen. Smart move, get me away from the bedroom. But I wasn't biting. Hold up, I said, stepping back. Gotta grab something. Her face tightened just for a split second before she recovered. Sure, I'll start dinner. She bolted, leaving me alone again. Therefore, I turned back to the closet, flashlight still in hand, its weight grounding me. I slid the door open slow, expecting, hoping, it'd be empty. But there was a duffel bag shoved in the corner. Not mine, not hers. Black, scuffed, with a gym logo I didn't recognize. My fingers brushed it, and something clinked inside, metal, maybe keys. My mind spun. She'd said Mike, but this wasn't his style. Therefore, I straightened, ears perked for her footsteps. She was humming in the kitchen, oblivious or pretending to be. I had to act fast. Whatever game she was playing, I was about to flip the board. I zipped the duffel shut, leaving it exactly as I'd found it, and slid the closet door back into place. Claire's humming floated down the hall, a thin shield against the tension coiling in my chest. She thought she had me fooled, but I'd spent too many nights staking out targets to fall for this. Therefore, I grabbed my camera again, old habit, steadying my hands, and headed to the living room, playing the tired soldier card. Gonna crash for a bit, I called out, loud enough to sell it. She poked her head around the corner, apron on, all domestic charm. You sure? I'm making your favorite. Her smile was tight, eyes searching mine. But I waved her off, flopping onto the couch, eyes half closed. Just need a minute. She bought it, or acted like she did, and disappeared back into the kitchen. Therefore, I waited, counting her steps, the clatter of pans. Predictable. She'd always cooked to avoid talking. Minutes dragged. I kept still, breathing slow, until the house settled into a rhythm. Her in the kitchen, me asleep. But then it came again, that creak from the bedroom. Faint, deliberate, like someone testing their luck. My grip tightened on the flashlight, tucked under the cushion. I'd swapped it for something heavier from my kit. An old service tool, nothing sharp, just solid. Not for harm, for control. Therefore, I eased off the couch, silent as a shadow, and crept back down the hall. The bedroom door was still ajar. I slipped inside, positioning myself by the bed, tool in hand, aimed at the closet. Come out slow, I said, voice low, steady. Nothing. But the air shifted. Someone was holding their breath. Therefore, I stepped closer, ready to yank the door wide, when Claire's voice cut through from behind. Nathan? What are you doing? I turned, tool still raised, and saw her in the doorway, face pale. She dropped the act. But before I could answer, the closet burst open. A guy, all panic and flailing limbs, bolted past me. Claire screamed. I lunged, instincts kicking in, and the room exploded into chaos. Therefore, I knew this was just the beginning. The guy stumbled over the bed, all elbows and desperation, crashing into the nightstand as I grabbed his collar. He was wiry, maybe 30, with a cheap haircut and that cologne stench rolling off him like a fog. Claire's scream cut off sharp, replaced by a choked sob. Nathan, stop, she yelled, but I wasn't listening. I slammed him against the wall. Not hard, just enough to pin him, and held the tool up, its blunt edge glinting in the dim light. Who are you? I growled. He sputtered, eyes wild. I'm nobody, man, just... Claire lunged, grabbing my arm. Let him go, please. Her nails dug in, but I shook her off, keeping him pinned. Therefore, the pieces snapped together, the jacket, the mugs, the bag. This wasn't a one-off. How long? I asked, voice flat, eyes on her now. She froze, mouth opening, then closing. Guilty. Months, he muttered like it'd save him. Claire's face crumpled, tears spilling. Nathan, I didn't mean, but I cut her off, turning back to him. Name. He swallowed hard. Derek, Derek, not Mike, not her brother. Therefore my rage flared, but I kept it cold, controlled. I'd seen worse betrayals in the field. Guys ratting out their own for a paycheck. This, personal. Messier. I let him go, stepping back, tool still in hand. He slumped, rubbing his neck, but didn't run. Smart. Claire sank onto the bed, sobbing into her hands. I'm sorry, she kept saying, like it'd fix anything. But then Derek opened his mouth again. She said you were gone for good. My head snapped toward him. Gone for good? I'd been deployed, not dead. Therefore, I looked at her, waiting. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Explain, I said, calm but sharp. She hiccuped, wiping her face. I thought you weren't coming back. Not after the last fight. The fight, 6 months ago, over money, over me leaving again. Harsh words, sure, but gone. But before I could dig deeper, Derek shifted, eyeing the door. Therefore, I blocked it, a plan forming. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. They'd regret this night. Derek's words hung in the air like smoke. Claire thought I was gone for good. I stared at her, crumpled on the bed, mascara streaking her cheeks. You told him I wasn't coming back. My voice was steady, but inside, something cracked. She'd been my anchor through deployments, the one I'd pictured waiting. But she hiccuped, avoiding my gaze. I didn't know, Nathan. You were so distant, always leaving. Distant? I called when I could, sent letters. Therefore, her excuse felt flimsy, a curtain over something uglier. Derek shifted, still by the wall, watching us like a trapped rat. She said you two were done, he added, testing the waters. Claire snapped, shut up, but that only fueled me. I stepped closer to her, towering. Done, huh? So you moved him in? That jacket, those mugs, that's not a fling. She flinched, and I saw it. Guilt raw and deep. Therefore, the truth hit. She hadn't just slipped up. This was a life she'd built without me. I was lonely, she whispered, like it had softened the blow. Lonely. I'd been dodging sandstorms and worse, counting days till home, while she'd been playing house. But then Derek piped up again, voice shaky. It wasn't just me. She's been. Claire lunged at him, shrieking, don't. Too late. My gut twisted. Not just him. What else was she hiding? Therefore, I grabbed her arm, not rough, just firm, and pulled her back. Finish that sentence, I told him. He hesitated, then spilled. She's been meeting others. Said she needed options. Options. Like I was a bad lease she traded up. Claire yanked free, sobbing harder. He's lying. But her panic said otherwise. I'd seen liars crack under less pressure. She was done. Therefore, my shock morphed into something colder, sharper. I didn't yell. Didn't hit. Instead, I grabbed my camera from the dresser, its familiar weight grounding me. Both of you, I said, voice low, stay put. They froze, wide-eyed. I wasn't sure what I'd do next, but one thing was clear. This wasn't ending quietly. Claire whimpered, Derek tensed, and I knew. They'd handed me the match. Now I'd light the fire. I pointed the camera at them, lens glinting in the bedroom's dim light. Move, I said, nodding toward the living room. Claire's sobs hitched, confusion creasing her face. Nathan, move, I repeated sharper. She shuffled forward, Derek trailing, his bravado gone. They thought I'd snap, maybe swing that tool still dangling in my hand. But I'd learned control in tighter spots than this. Therefore, I followed, mind racing with a plan, not violence, something worse. In the living room, I flicked on the overhead light, harsh and unflattering. Sit, I said, pointing to the couch. They obeyed, Claire clutching a throw pillow like a shield, Derek slumping beside her. I set the camera on the coffee table, hitting record. You gonna talk? I said, leaning against the wall. Everything. On tape. Claire's eyes widened. You can't, but I cut her off. I can, and you will. She tried pleading, voice soft. Nathan, please, this isn't you. Not me? She didn't know me anymore. Therefore, I smirked, dry as dust. Start with how many options you had. Derek squirmed, but Claire stayed silent, lips trembling. I tapped the tool against my palm. Not a threat, just rhythm. Fine. Derek, you go. He swallowed, then mumbled, 3, maybe 4 guys. I wasn't the first. Claire's head whipped toward him, betrayal flashing. Hypocrite. Keep going, I said, voice flat. He rambled, dates, motels. lies she'd spun about me being unstable. Claire interjected, "He's exaggerating," but the details piled up, each one a shovel, digging her deeper. Therefore, I upped the ante. "Stand up, both of you. Face the wall." They hesitated, but I stepped closer, looming. They complied, backs to me, camera rolling. "Now apologize." Loud. Claire's voice cracked. "I'm sorry, Nathan." Derek echoed her, monotone. But it wasn't enough. I wanted them to feel it. Again, like you mean it. They did, voices shaking. But then Derek spun, fists clenched. "This is nuts, man." He charged, aiming for the camera. Therefore, I sidestepped, tripping him into the table. The crash echoed, Claire screamed, and I knew neighbors would hear. This was spiraling fast, and I wasn't stopping it. Derek hit the floor hard, the coffee table wobbling as the camera skittered off, still recording. Claire shrieked, "Nathan, stop this." But I didn't touch him again, just stood there, tool in hand, watching him scramble up, clutching his elbow. His glare promised trouble, but he didn't swing. Smart move. Therefore, I grabbed the camera, checked it, lens intact, red light blinking, and set it back, aiming at them. "Keep going," I said like nothing happened. Claire sank to her knees, begging, "Please, just let us go. I'll leave, I swear." Leave? She'd already checked out months ago. But before I could answer, a sharp rap hit the door. "Open up. Police." My stomach dropped. Nosy Mrs. Carter next door. Her hearing was sharper than her yappy dog's. Therefore, I froze, calculating. Derek smirked, sensing an out, while Claire's sobs turned theatrical. I opened the door, hands raised, tool already tucked in my pocket. Two cops, one young, twitchy, the other older, bored, stepped in. "What's going on?" the older one asked, eyeing the mess. Claire jumped in, voice wobbly. "He's lost it. He threatened us." Derek nodded, pointing at the camera. "He's filming some psycho game." But I stayed calm, palms up. They were in my house. Uninvited. Check the tape. The young cop grabbed the camera, rewinding. His partner squinted at me. "Military?" I nodded. "Just got back." Context mattered. They'd assumed stress, not malice. But then Claire doubled down. "He's been unstable since deployment." I was scared. Unstable? She'd flipped the script, painting me as the nutcase. Therefore, the older cop's face hardened. "Turn around, hands behind you." Cuffs clicked on, cold and tight. Derek's smirk widened as they hauled me out, Claire trailing with crocodile tears. Neighbors gawked from their porches, small-town gossip fuel. But as the squad car door slammed, I caught the young cop muttering. Tape shows them confessing something. A crack in their story. Therefore, I sat back, mind churning. This wasn't over. They'd handed the cops evidence, not me. Claire thought she'd won, spinning her web. She didn't know I'd been trained to wait out worse traps than this. The courtroom smelled like stale coffee and wood polish, a low hum of murmurs filling the air as I sat, cuffed, in an ill-fitting suit my public defender had scrounged up. Claire was across the room, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. Derek beside her, cleaned up and smug. They'd rehearsed this. Her the victim, him the reluctant witness. But I'd seen the tape in evidence. Grainy, chaotic, but clear enough to catch their confessions. Therefore, I leaned back, watching the prosecutor strut like he'd already won. He started with Claire, coaxing her story. He came home unhinged, she said, voice trembling. Forced us to say things on camera, threatened us with a weapon. The weapon was my flashlight, now exhibit, spun into something sinister. Derek backed her up, claiming I'd attacked him. But the tape rolled next, projected on a shaky screen. Claire admitting to options, Derek spilling names. The room shifted. Jurors frowned. My defender, a wiry guy named Paul, pounced. That's not coercion. That's them talking freely. Nathan barely speaks. Context flipped. I wasn't the aggressor. They dug their own hole. But the prosecutor countered. He intimidated them with a military background. Unstable, post-deployment. Unstable again. They'd latched onto my service, twisting it. Therefore, I clenched my fists, silent as Paul argued back, no violence. Just a man betrayed. The judge, a graying woman with sharp eyes, watched me, not them. I kept my cool, even now a trick from recon. Never blink first. But Claire's final jab sank deep. He's not the man I married, she said, tears flowing. The jury softened, sympathy bait. Therefore, the tape's impact faded. Emotion trumped facts. Paul whispered, "We've got a shot," but I saw the tide turning. Deliberation took hours. When they filed back, the foreman's voice was flat. Guilty, assault, unlawful restraint. 3 years. Claire gasped, performative, while Derek had a grin. But as they led me out, the judge's gaze lingered, like she wasn't sold. Therefore, I nodded to myself, already plotting. Prison wasn't the end, it was a pause. Claire thought she'd buried me. She didn't know I'd spent years learning to dig out of worse. The cell door clanged shut, a dull echo bouncing off concrete walls. 3 years stretched ahead, 1,095 days to stew, to plan. The bunk smelled like rust and sweat. My cellmate, a hulking guy named Rico who grunted a hello and went back to sketching. I've been in tighter spots overseas, so I adapted, kept my head down, ears open. But Claire's face burned in my mind. Her tears in court a mask for the knife she'd twisted. Therefore, I settled in, letting time sharpen my edge. Rico turned out useful. Ex-con with a knack for finding people. Parolees, debtors, cheats. "You got a score to settle?" he asked one night, pencil scratching a portrait of his kid. I shrugged, playing coy. "Maybe." But he saw through me. Guys like us smell grudges. Therefore, I traded stories, my betrayal for his contacts. He knew a guy, Tommy, who ran favors on the outside. Nothing big, just eyes and ears. Weeks blurred into months. I worked the yard, lifting weights, keeping fit, but my real exercise was mental. I'd snag a disposable camera from the commissary, cheap, flimsy, snapping shots of the block, cataloging faces. Habit from recon, not art. But it kept me sane, focused. Therefore, when Tommy's first letter slipped through, smuggled in a hollowed-out book, I grinned. "They're still together," it read. "New place, fancier. She's got cash now, source unclear." Cash. Claire had barely scraped by before. Options, Derek had said, maybe one paid off. But the letter added a twist. Heard her crying on a call. Something's off. Off. My pulse quickened. Therefore, I wrote back, pushing Tommy for more, addresses, routines. Rico watched, smirking. "You're a ghost, man. They won't see you coming." He was right. I'd learned patience in the dark, waiting for targets to slip. By year 2, I had a map. Claire and Derek in a cushy suburb, living loud. But cracks showed. Tommy hinted at fights, debts. Therefore, I lay on my bunk, staring at the ceiling, pieces slotting together. Freedom was close, and so was payback. They'd build a castle on sand. I'd bring the tide. The gate buzzed open, and I stepped out into a gray dawn, free after 1,087 days. Early release for good behavior. The air hit different. No more stale concrete tang, just cold and crisp. I carried a duffel with my few belongings. A worn camera, some letters, a cheap jacket. Prison had sharpened me. Leaner, quieter, eyes like a hawk's. But Claire and Derek loomed in my mind, living fat off whatever scam they'd pulled. Therefore, I hitched a ride to town, Tommy's last note tucked in my pocket. He'd tracked them to a suburb an hour out. Big house, new cars, the works. "She's got a job now," he'd written. "Office gig, but the money's too good." Too good? Claire could barely balance a checkbook when we were together. But I didn't dwell. I found a dive motel, paid cash, and spread Tommy's intel on the bed. Photos, addresses, a blurry shot of them at a bar. Therefore, I grabbed my camera, zooming in on her face. She looked older, harder. Good. I wasn't rushing. Recon taught me timing. Strike too soon, you miss the shot. But then a detail caught me. A third figure in one photo, shadowed, handing Derek something. Cash. My gut said yes. Therefore, I called Tommy from a burner phone, voice low. "Who's the extra?" He didn't know, promised to dig. I hung up, staring at the ceiling. They weren't just coasting. They were tangled in something bigger. That night, I walked the streets, blending in, jeans, hoodie, nobody special. But my mind churned. Claire's tears on that call Tommy mentioned. Fear, not guilt. Therefore, I stopped at a diner, sketching their house layout on a napkin from memory of his notes. 2 exits, fenced yard, no cameras. Sloppy. They thought I was gone for good. like she'd told Derek years back. My lips twitched, first smile in months. They'd build a life on lies, and I'd dismantle it, brick by brick. But that shadowed figure nagged me. This wasn't just personal anymore. Something else was in play. I rented a beat-up sedan, gray, forgettable, and drove to their suburb at dusk, parking a block from their house. It was a 2-story deal, all clean lines and fresh paint, glowing like a magazine spread. Claire's doing. She'd always craved better. But the curtains twitched as I watched, and Derek stepped out, lighting a cigarette. He looked twitchy, scanning the street. Therefore, I sank lower in the seat, snapping a quick shot with my camera. Old habit, proof of life. They'd upgraded. Her sedan was new, his truck flashy. Money flowed from somewhere, and not her office job. I'd scoped the place online, some insurance firm, mid-level pay. But Tommy's photos showed her in designer coats, Derek flashing a thick watch. Therefore, I tailed him when he peeled out, keeping distance. He hit a bar downtown, seedy joint called Rusty's. I parked, waited, watched him meet a guy, tall, slick suit, handing over an envelope. Same shadow from the picture? I snapped more shots, lens steady. Derek pocketed the cash, clapped the guy's shoulder, and left. But the suit lingered, making a call, face tense. Therefore, my brain kicked into gear. This wasn't just cheating cash, it was a hustle. Back at the motel, I pieced it together. Claire's job was a front. Tommy's digging confirmed late-night meetings, coded emails. She'd climbed into something dirty, and Derek was the muscle. But then Tommy called, voice hushed. Found your shadow. Name's Victor, runs a loan racket. They owe him big. Oh, that flipped it. Claire wasn't winning. She was trapped. Therefore, I grinned cold and slow. Their castle wasn't a prize. It was a cage. I spent the next day shadowing her, office to a diner, then a tense meet with Victor in an alley. She looked scared, handing over a bag. My camera caught it all, her shaky hands, his sneer. Evidence. They were drowning, and I'd be the current to pull them under. But Victor's presence meant stakes higher than I'd planned. This wasn't just revenge now. It was a game I could rig. I had them in my lens, Claire and Derek, scrambling under Victor's thumb. 3 days of tailing confirmed it. She'd cook books at her job, funnel cash to him. Derek played courier, dropping payments. But they were sloppy, late meets, loud fights in their driveway. Therefore, I started small, planting seeds. I mailed an anonymous note to their house. I know what you're doing. No signature, just enough to rattle them. Next day, Derek stormed out, yelling into his phone. Perfect. I dug deeper, using Tommy's leads. Victor's racket was shaky. Cops had sniffed around, but lacked proof. But I had shots, Claire with the bag, Derek with the envelope. Therefore, I leaked a tip to the precinct. Not as Nathan, just a concerned citizen, with blurry prints attached. Let them stew. Meanwhile, I hit their weak spot. Money. I'd learned forgery tricks in prison. Not proud, but useful. I slipped fake bills into Derek's truck at Rusty's. Enough to spook Victor when he got shorted. Claire cracked first. I watch her pace their yard. Phone pressed her ear. Voice shrill. We're done if he finds out. Him, Victor, not me. But Derek brushed it off, cocky as ever. Therefore, I upped it, dropped a forged email to her work inbox, hinting an audit. She bolted to the office that night, frantic. I followed, snapping her digging through files, shredding papers. Panic made her sloppy. She didn't see me. The noose tightened. But Victor was the wild card. Tommy warned he'd roughed up debtors before. Nothing lethal, just loud. Therefore, I shifted gears, leaving a burner phone in Derek's truck with a text. Victor's onto you. He found it, freaked, and called Claire. I listened from a hacked radio frequency. Prison tricks again, catching her sob, we can't pay him off. They were crumbling, and I hadn't even shown my face. But then headlights flared behind me. Victor's sleek car, pulling up to their house. He stepped out, fists clenched, and banged on their door. Therefore, I stayed low, camera ready. This was it, their empire falling, and me holding the trigger. But I wondered, would he spot my hand in this? Victor's voice boomed through their front door, muffled but furious. Open up, or I come in. I crouched across the street, camera rolling, catching Derek yank it wide, face pale. Claire hovered behind, clutching a wine glass like a lifeline. They'd unraveled. My notes, the fake cash, the audit scare had done their work. But Victor wasn't here to chat. He shoved past, barking about missed payments, and I heard glass shatter. Therefore, I edged closer, staying shadows, recording every word. Derek stammered, "We'll get it, I swear." But Victor wasn't buying. "You think I'm dumb? Cops got pics, my pics." My tip had landed. The precinct was circling. Claire's voice broke in, "It's not us." But Victor laughed, cold and mean. "You're done." Therefore, I watched their world implode. Victor trashed their living room. Derek swung and missed. Claire screamed. Neighbors peeked out, phones up. Evidence piled high. I'd planned this. Financial ruin first. The forged email triggered a real audit. Tommy confirmed her job, suspended her that morning. Then public disgrace. Cops would tie them to Victor's mess. But I wasn't done. Therefore, I slipped to their mailbox, dropping a final bomb. A USB with my bedroom footage from 3 years back, labeled for Victor. They'd find it, and he'd see their old lies, Claire's options, Derek's loose lips. Mutual destruction. Victor stormed out, tires squealing, leaving them shell-shocked. But then Claire spotted the USB, fished it out, and played it on their laptop. I'd rigged a vantage point through the window. Her gasp was audible. Derek cursed, smashing a lamp. Therefore, I stepped into the open, hoodie up, and knocked. They froze, staring as I lowered it. "Miss me?" Claire choked. "Nathan." Derek lunged, but I sidestepped calm. "Cops are 2 minutes out. Enjoy the ride." Sirens wailed, right on cue. They bolted for the back door, but I tipped the precinct their layout. No escape. Therefore, I walked away, camera in hand, as lights flashed behind me. Revenge tasted bitter, not sweet. Hollow, like a shot I'd framed, but never printed. But it was done, or so I thought, until a letter slid under my motel door that night. I sat on the motel bed, the letter in my lap, torn open but unread. Outside, crickets chirped, a stark contrast to the chaos I'd left at Claire's. They were in cuffs now. Tommy texted confirmation. Fraud, racketeering, the works. Victor got nabbed too, his racket blown wide. I'd won, hadn't I? But my hands shook as I unfolded the paper. Derek's scrawl stared back, not Claire's. Therefore, I braced myself, expecting threats, but got something else. "She played us both," it read. "That night? Her idea. Said you'd never know." Victor was her ticket out, not mine. My stomach sank. Claire, the mastermind? I'd pinned Derek as the grunt, her as the fool. But he kept going. "She's at a stash, cash offshore. Check her old laptop." Therefore, I sat back, mind reeling. I'd torn their life down, but she'd been steps ahead, even in prison's shadow. I grabbed my camera, flipping through old shots. Her face, always a little too composed. Recon had taught me to read patterns, but I'd missed hers. Therefore, I drove to a storage unit I'd kept, untouched since my arrest, and dug out her old laptop. Seized, then returned, forgotten. It booted slow, but there was encrypted files, bank logs. She'd siphoned thousands, Victor just a pawn. The real twist? A draft email to someone new, dated a month ago. She'd never stopped. But I was hollowed out. Revenge hadn't filled the hole. I chased a ghost, thinking it'd heal me. Therefore, I burned the letter, wiped the laptop, and dumped it in a river. Let her rot in jail, chasing shadows like I had. I walked back to the motel, dawn breaking, camera slung over my shoulder. Free, but not really. Then my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You missed the big fish." No name, just that. I stared, pulse kicking. Claire's game wasn't over. But neither was mine. Therefore, I packed my bag, ready for whatever came next. Thank you for tuning into this story. We appreciate every single one of you. We'd love to know what part of the world are you watching from right now. Let us know in the comments.